Christopher Media. Let's make some noise.
Hold your ears, folks. It's showtime.
People pay good money to see this movie. When they go out to a theater, they want cold sodas, hot popcorn, and no monsters in the projection booth.
Everyone pretend podcasting isn't boring.
Turn it off. Turn it off.
What's this documentary for? You're going to do a making of?
Making of something.
And then you got to do a making of the documentary. Isn't there another guy with a camera?
There's somebody following him.
Good. You got to have a bunch of them.
Snoots to the news!
We're coming up on the foundation upon which my entire life was built.
I've told Kevin Smith many times, you're one of the reasons I'm a director.
There's an element of luck involved, but it's also being the voice of your generation, which he was.
I saw a movie and it made me change everything.
He's like, hey, I'm writing a script and I'm putting you in it. I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. And we were going to make like a video with some friends.
I knew he was one of these guys that was into plays, somebody I would never have anything in common with.
He was in every play in high school.
There was nobody in film school that could write like him.
25 years later, people are still talking about Clerks.
I was aware of Kevin Smith beyond his movies, but as an idea. And he was eloquent, and he was funny, and he'd go on stage and talk for an hour.
Kevin has created his own world, his own humor, his own fan base.
Fans coming from Australia, Brazil, it connected with them.
Kevin was the first person I knew that set up an internet visibility to reach his fan base.
Kevin was on there. He talked to everybody. Now, you can do that anywhere, but back then it was just unheard of.
We also had common interests in comics, Star Wars, and hockey.
We're now fully in the world that he was always evangelizing.
I'm such a fan of his that
I would have done it if it was a Human Walrus movie.
I love Kevin Smith.
Hello, awesome dude.
He is a god among nerds.
Who doesn't know who Kevin Smith is?
He became a cultural touchstone beyond the movies that he made.
He carved his own path in a way that I don't think was possible when he started.
He will never give up. He will find a way to keep going and going and going.
It was by default that I wound up working at the store that would literally change my life.
Hey folks, welcome to a special episode of The Projection Booth. Today I am wrapping up coverage of South by Southwest. I'm hoping that I will be able to catch up with a few more movies along the way. There's that Sparks documentary that I hear is pretty fantastic. I'm looking forward to seeing that. I doubt I'll be able to speak to the director of that anytime soon. Edgar, baby, if you're listening, please give me a call. On this episode, I am talking to director Malcolm Ingram about his new film, Clerk. It is the Kevin Smith story. What is there to say about Kevin Smith that hasn't been said before? Surprisingly, quite a bit. Ingram puts a lot of effort into this. You can really tell that he respects and admires Smith and that he and Smith have been friends for a long time. Smith is a little bit of an open book. We've all seen his tribute to his wife's taint on Twitter. God, it pains me to even say that. But this movie actually does a good job of kind of recontextualizing Smith, showing us the humble beginnings, the Clerk days, the big breakout that he had, and what he's done since. He's gone through a lot of different phases in his career. He's done a lot of different things over the years. I haven't necessarily gotten down with all of them. Still haven't seen Yoga Hosers because I hated Tusk so much. Not a big fan of Comic Book Men, that TV show, but hey, you know what? He's trying different stuff. More power to him. I had a great opportunity to finally talk with Malcolm. He is talking to me from his car, so be warned that this is not the best audio quality in the world. At least he didn't get into an accident, so there is that as a positive. I had a great time talking with him, and I hope that you enjoy this conversation.
How's it going?
It's going well. How are you doing? How was your world premiere?
It was good, man. It's you know what? It's crazy. It's crazy. It's a privilege to get to show your movie. It's a weird way to show your movie. COVID sucks. The past year's been bizarre, but I'm glad that people have finally seen it. A lot of people are liking it.
Well, they should. It's a great doc.
Thanks, man. Like, it's interesting because the thing about reviews is that, like, look, if you believe the good ones, you got to believe the bad ones. So essentially, it's very looking at stuff, and I usually try not to look at stuff, but it's funny. Like, there's very, very confusing. Like, some people are just like, it's formless. It's a bunch of stuff, and I'm like, well, no, it's kind of a traditional like examination from period to period of the man's career. It's just very funny. Like, you just find yourself arguing with critics, and you're like, what am I doing? Like, everybody's allowed to have their opinion. You just get caught in these traps of like, you want to defend yourself, and you're just like, don't be crazy. Like, one reviewer like said something that like literally pissed me off, and I was like, because they were factually incorrect, and and you're just like, I'm going to send them an email, and then you're like, just calm down. Have people have their opinions. You don't got to fucking fight everybody. You know, and this movie is a little personal because, you know, I made it about a friend, so you don't want to fuck that up, right? It's a very complicated thing, so, you know, there's a lot of pressure on. So if people take it wrong, or people, you know, you got to, I'm a little defensive, and I'm trying not to be.
How did you and Smith meet?
We met at the Toronto Film Festival in '94. I was writing for Film Threat magazine. He was showing Clerk. We met at a French restaurant, and he ordered pancakes. Not crepes, buddy, pancakes. He was just like, do you guys have any of them pancakes? And they're like, crepes, sir. And he's like, no, pancakes. Like, that's the first memory I have of Kevin. In our first conversation, when I met Kevin, I was a huge fan of 90210, specifically Shannon Doherty. And he was telling me this movie he's making called Mallrats. I was like, what are you doing next? He's like, a movie called Mallrats. I'm like, if you make a movie called Mallrats, it takes, you know, it's this kind of thing. If it's Clerks in a mall, you got to cast Shannon Doherty. And at all these fucking reasons at the time why I should. And he ended up casting Shannon Doherty. It's a very funny story. I was a fucking Shannon Doherty fan, like you read about. Like, I was a huge Shannon Doherty fan. Like, Brenda. I lived, when I was in Vancouver doing a lot of booze and drugs back in the grunge days, I had a wall of Shannon that literally, I just had all pictures of her and posts of her on my wall in my living room. Like, I was a huge Shannon. So it actually, like, not only to be the guy that got her cast in Mallrats, but to actually get to hang out with her. It was incredible. And the great thing with Shannon Doherty is she does not disappoint. She's a wonderful, feisty firecracker of a human being. She's nobody's fool. Meeting her was amazing. But I met her under the best circumstances possible. It's like, this is the guy that suggested you for the movie. And she's like, oh, I like that guy.
Your career and Smith's career have been kind of intertwined, like even all the way back to your first feature, having like Jason Lee and Jason Mewes in that. I mean, it's just, I didn't realize how integral your career is with his.
It's embarrassing, actually. I was working for Film Threat magazine, and then I was doing an on-set for Mallrats, and then he invited me to stay for the entire shoot. And he ended up getting some deal with Miramax where he ended up getting money to make these micro-budget movies, and literally at the end of the Mallrats shoot, he offered for me money to make my first movie, which fucking blew me out of the water. He gave me the money to make my first movie, and because I was on the set all the time, and I'd become friends with Jason Lee and Carmen, his wife at the time, like, I was just like, you guys want to come out and make a movie? And they're like, yeah. So it was just like, that was like, I basically stole the cast of Mallrats. Like, you know, Ethan Suplee's in the movie, Joey Lauren Abbott is in the movie, you know, and small cameos. Like, drawing my first movie, I was very privileged, very lucky. It's weird because I mostly think of you when it comes to your documentaries. Like, when Bear Nation came out, that was just like, it really, you were on my radar. I was just like, oh, wow, this is fucking fantastic. This is a great doc. Oh, thanks. How did that one come to be? Bear Nation, well, I'm a bear. Kevin was actually the one that suggested. I wanted to make, it just seemed too on the nose for me to make it. I just made Small Town Gay Bar. After I made Small Town Gay Bar, like, my father died, and I ended up, and my most important relationship in my life ended. with my boyfriend. So I was in a fucking dark place. And, you know, most of my ideas for documentaries are pretty dark. And Kevin was just like, just fucking make the bear documentary. And I was like, all right. So I put it together, and I just didn't want to make the typical bear documentary and have a bunch of fucking muscle bears talking about bullshit. So I was like, well, who interests me that's in this world? And then I talked to Bob Mould. And once, Bob Mould, I talked to Kevin. So I wanted to kind of get different disparate voices in the film. So that was kind of luck. And basically, I was making it while Kevin was making Cop Out. So I got Tracy Morgan to be in the beginning, which was awesome. That was a very fortuitous movie. That was, of all the movies, that was the easiest and funnest documentary I made. Like, that was easy. Like, a lot of the guys, like, the truth of a Bear Nation, a lot of the people interviewed in that movie were ex-lovers. I did a lot of that documentary were like in my living room. I talked to like some ex-boyfriends. No, I mean, I talked to a lot of other people, but I just wanted to start the reason why my ex-boyfriend, or the reason they're my boyfriend is because I found them fascinating, interesting people. So it made sense to kind of have them involved.
If that was the easiest doc for you to make, what was the most difficult?
This was tough. This and Continental were tough. This was tough just because, like, look, I took my job as a documentarian very seriously, and Kevin took his role, Kevin Smith, very seriously, and we butted heads. We fought. Like, we didn't talk for a fucking year while making this movie. Like, literally did not talk for a year. That was all over the Weinstein thing. Because, like, at first we agreed that Weinstein wasn't going to documentary because the case was kind of like, I knew Kevin intimately enough to know what the story was. And we all knew that Harvey Weinstein was a piece of shit. We didn't know he was a rapist piece of shit. You know what I mean? Like, it's a big leap from scoundrel to rapist. We all knew he was a scoundrel. We didn't know he was a rapist. And, of course, rapist is when it's very problematic. And I knew what Kevin knew, so I was just like, look, I'm not the guy to tell the Harvey Weinstein story. Like, I'm not a good enough filmmaker to balance telling the Kevin Smith story and just do a dip into the Harvey Weinstein atrocity. Like, I couldn't get my head around it. And, Kevin was like, well, I feel it's important that I talk about it. And I was just like, okay, that's great, but I think that it's going to sidetrack everything if we're telling this fairly happy, puffy, like, I don't want to say puffy, but Kevin is not a man full of controversy. The Harvey Weinstein thing is the closest he comes to real controversy. Like, there's the dogma thing and everything, but the dogma thing was much ado about nothing. The Harvey Weinstein thing is real fucking meaty controversy. But I knew Kevin's relation to it, so I felt comfortable not focusing on that, and I didn't want to muddy things by getting into that because I just didn't feel that I didn't feel I was the filmmaker to tell that story. So I just wanted to, like, look, like, other people are going to tell the Harvey Weinstein story. I don't think that we have a place for it. Kevin was like, Kevin felt very strongly about it. Then we both stood to our guns. I was like, fuck you. He was like, fuck you. We didn't talk for a year. Finally, it was just like I was just like, okay, if you want to try something. And it was so funny. Filming the part where he talks about Harvey Weinstein is the least directed. Like, it was so, like, I literally sat behind the camera. Like, the camera was set up, and I was like, okay, like, what are you going to say? Like, I didn't ask him a question. I was just like, all right. And he basically said his thing, and I was like, okay, that totally works. That's smart, and that's kind of like, it's his truth. And it was up to my editor to figure out a way. Like, literally, my editor, I like that Harvey Weinstein thing fitting in is a testament to Kevin and my editor. Kevin filmed this bit. I believe very much in making documentary. Like, they're not stitched together, they're woven together. You know what I mean? You can't just stitch a bunch of shit together. It's all got to be woven together. And it was up to my editor to weave Kevin's narrative on the Harvey Weinstein thing into the film. And he found a perfect place. I kind of like as I said, like, I didn't see how it would work. I couldn't get around the largeness of the Weinstein thing. I didn't want to be exploitational, and I didn't want to be breezy about it. I wanted to be like, that deserves a deep dive. But Kevin said his truth, and it ultimately worked. That was hard. It was hard on both of us. It was hard on Kevin. It was hard on me. We were very fucking angry at each other, but we were both kind of like, I understand his point, and that's about it. But that's the negative stuff. But the positive stuff is I wanted to make I'm making a documentary about somebody that, I have a lot of respect for, so I don't want to fuck it up. So there was a lot of pressure. And at the time, we were rushing to make it, like, because we were kind of focusing on this 25-year anniversary thing. So we were very rushed, and it was very rushed. Timing, it was like fucking, like, we shot majority of the footage of those interviews within a 3-month time period, which is very intense when you're talking about getting those people together.
Yeah, there's got to be that extra pressure of making a doc about, one, a filmmaker, so you can't bluff anything, and two, that he's your friend. So you have to really tread that line very carefully. So yeah, it's quite a juggling job that you just did.
And on top, and again, it's two strong personalities. Like, I have a very strong personality. You don't want to just make this fucking ridiculous puffy piece. You want to maintain some, like, I'm a social issue queer documentarian. You know what I mean? I have ethics. Like, I believe, there's certain things like, ethics aren't so big anymore. I'm somebody who firmly believes in certain things. I believe in documents. So I hold myself to a serious code of ethics. And essentially, like, this was a complicated process for me. And I was constantly checking myself and making sure that, I was being true, not only to Kevin, but to myself. So it was complicated.
What finally pushed you to make this documentary? What was that decision point for you?
These guys were talking about doing a book for Kevin's 25th anniversary, and Kevin suggested me for it. And I started kind of talking with the publisher about it. And it's just kind of like, I hadn't really been a writer in a long time. And I'm a documentarian. So I kind of I just said, Kevin, like, why don't we make a documentary? Like, I mean, I'll interview people for a book, but like, I would rather film it and make a documentary. And Kevin agreed. So it came together very organically. It was just kind of like, Kevin certainly wasn't pushing for it. I was the one who approached him about it. And it was just the 25-year thing that kind of, those anniversaries tend to lead to such things as, making a document of. I wanted to tell the 25-year careers. And hopefully in 25 years, somebody picks it up and tells that story.
How many things do you work on at the same time? How many films or projects do you have going at once?
One. And that's the frustrating of this, because this movie's like, it's been like this fucking year. Like, it was supposed to debut last year. I can't move on to the next one. Like, I know the next one I want to make, but it's just been like, I've been focusing on kind of getting this one out to the world. So I can't walk and chew bubble. I can only do one movie at a time.
Yeah, the pandemic must have just completely fucked you over.
Well, on so many levels. Like, I'm a fat man, so, this shit'll kill me. I've been living in constant fear for a year. It's just crazy, right? I mean, this pandemic is like, look, we're casually doing this interview, but there's literally there's a fucking, in Canada right now, like, we're having a problem with the vaccinations and the variants are growing. And it's just like, we're living in this kind of weird fucking world, but we're just having this casual conversation about this documentary I made that played virtually at a film festival. It's just so fucking weird. It's just weird. Everything's weird. And but it's amazing how humans, how we adapt to make things not weird. One thing I've really seen in the past year is just the real resilience of the human spirit, and just kind of like how we just accept things. It's just like, okay, I guess this is the way it is now. Let's do it like this. Like, the one thing I wouldn't give in on was Zoom. Until this film festival came up, I hadn't done Zoom with anybody. Anytime anybody suggested, I would laugh at them, be like, yeah, okay, I'll give you a call. And so when, like, all of a sudden I started doing a lot of Zoom, and then I had one press day and all the interviews were Zoom, and I was like, I'm not going to do that again. And the publisher says, well, that's what people are doing now. I'm like, well, I'm not going to do that. I'll happily talk to people. Like, it's a privilege to get people to talk about your film, but I'm not going to do it on Zoom. Do I know what's next for me? Yeah, I'm going to make a documentary about a Canadian filmmaker by the name of Bruce McDonald, who has, like, Richard Linklater was a big inspiration for Kevin. Bruce McDonald was my Richard Linklater. He's this Canadian filmmaker that's made a lot of really great films. Quentin Tarantino actually released one of his films in the 90s called Hardcore Loco, when Quentin was doing that Rolling Thunder thing. He's just this really awesome Canadian filmmaker. It's kind of like, I had the privilege to be my friend, and now I want to do kind of my inspiration. I like doing the biography, and I like, and the thing about documentaries, you have to be interested in the subject. You can't fake it. Maybe some people can, I can't. Like, if I'm doing a documentary on something, because I don't go in with a bunch of, like, Some could say it's laziness, but it's not. Like, I don't go in with preset questions. I've never had cards in my life. I just go in and sit down and ask questions and have a conversation, which works for my style because essentially, like, it's more comfortable. If you're sitting there just with a bunch of cards talking to somebody face to face, it doesn't feel organic. But if you're just like, hey, man, and then if you're genuinely interested in your subject, that will guide you. You know what I mean? Your curiosity will lead to the best interview because you're naturally curious and basically you want to know what everybody else wants. And that was the funny thing with telling this. So, like, one of the fucking things of reviews, like, you're not supposed to read them, but I did. A lot of people are saying, like, well, there's nothing new. And I'm like, it's fucking Kevin Smith lives in public. Like, what new can you say about this guy? He's not a puzzle that needs to be solved. You know what I mean? There's nothing new to say about Kevin Smith. I mean, he is constantly evolving and changing, but he's very good at documenting himself. What I wanted to do was do this kind of triptych of the 25 years of his career. And I didn't want to do this traditional yearbook thing of just bringing out the same old fucking people. I wanted to have interesting people kind of, weigh in. Like having Jason Reitman, having Richard Linklater, having Penn Jillette. Like, these are interesting people to have talk about Kevin. I just wanted to kind of do this summary of the past 25 years and basically do a look back. And I'm really happy with it. And people seem to like it. And then, but you can't please everybody.
Malcolm, it is so nice to finally be able to talk to you. I know we've been friends on Facebook for a while, but we've never had a conversation. So this is fucking awesome.
Thank you for taking the time to talk to me about my bullshit. I appreciate it.
Good luck. I know you got a lot of these set up for today, so good luck with all that, and I hope you get out of traffic soon.
Thanks, man. It was really awesome to talk to you, man. Like, sincerely. Rock and roll, my brother.
Well, folks, this is it for South by Southwest coverage. Thank you so much for enjoying these episodes that I've done. Please check out the other 3 if you haven't heard those. Lots of good interviews. I've seen lots of good movies at the festival. I kind of like this whole idea of the remote festival, especially for somebody who can't necessarily afford to pack up the bags and go to Austin for a week and sit in a dark theater. Oh my God, that sounds like just the most wonderful thing, though, right now. Just being able to travel, hang out with people, see movies, go to different places, go to restaurants. One of these days, folks, maybe we'll get back to that. Until then, thank you so much for enjoying the show. Keep on keeping on.
If you enjoy this show and want more people to know about it, head on over to iTunes, leave a comment, and rate it 5 stars. Make sure you like and share us on Facebook, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter. Just search for Christopher Media. Thank you in advance for supporting Christopher Media by clicking on the PayPal button and by clicking through to all the sponsors who support ChristopherMedia.net. Most importantly, we would like to take the time to extend an extra special thanks to you. Christopher Media could not exist without your support. Thank you for visiting ChristopherMedia.net, and thank you for listening. Christopher Media. Let's make some noise.